Welcome to the Ayn Rand Fan Club. I'm Scott Schiff along with William Swig. William, how are you?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Good. I'm glad to hear it. We have back with us Allie Welch, my longtime friend and longtime Ayn Rand fan. Allie, welcome.
Hello, great to be here.
Great to have you. And this one's kind of special because I remember for years you've been warning me about Herbert Marcuse and how he was kind of like a voice of the New Left, and I'd heard of him. But then we found this piece from 1970s, The Objectivist, with George Walsh writing about Herbert Marcuse as the philosopher of the New Left. And just thought it would be great to do a subject about, can you give me just a little reminder of, where you first heard about Marcuse and how you saw him as a real danger point?
Yeah, just to set the context a little bit. So this essay, it's called Herbert Marcuse, Philosopher of the New Left. And it was written in The Objectivist in 1970 by George Walsh, the professor. I think he passed away in 2001. And he was a strong, objectivist scholar at the time. So from about, I guess, 1962, I think, to 1976, Ayn Rand was writing in the movement. They were writing these publications, the Objectivist newsletter, the Objectivist, which was kind of their journal, and then the Ayn Rand letter. So this essay was in the Objectivist in 1970. And I was reading the Objectivist. I think I had found a book in a library. I don't know, at one of my travels, I just found like a volume of all the publications for it. And I bought it, and I was just reading it one night. And I can't remember I don't think it was this essay, but it was another essay in the Objectivist where they talked about, Herbert Marcuse and how he was the father of the New Left. And of course, Ayn Rand wrote The New Left, the Anti-Industrial Revolution.
Right.
And so a lot of those essays appeared in there about him. So she was talking about him as the father of the New Left, and people at the time were talking about it. So he was, just to give a little background on him. So Herbert Marcuse was, he was from Germany, and he was a professor, and he was, so his dates are kind of 1898 to 1979. And he started the Institute of Social Research, or he was a kind of a founding member during the Weimar Republic in the 1930s. They set up the Institute for Social Research in Germany. I think it was originally like they had to move it because, all the rise of the Nazis was happening. So they kind of had to move around. And he ended up getting transplanted to the United States, I guess in the late 30s. Or in the 30s and then the 40s. And then he worked for the US government in the National Intelligence Agencies from about 1943 to 1950. So during this, so he's writing and he's doing all of his stuff. I think he was a professor at the time in Columbia. And there were other transplants from the Frankfurt School. So a lot of times when you hear the scholars talking about the founders of the postmodern movement and the German idealists and all, they're really kind of talking about the work that was going on in the Frankfurt School. And I believe, and maybe you know more than I, but I believe that critical theory came from Herbert Marcuse, like the original, he kind of sets up, in this essay, he kind of sets it up as, he had a book called One-Dimensional Man. And he talks about one-dimensional philosophy being the positive philosophy. Then he talks about the negative philosophy being two-dimensional, and that being the good philosophy. So it's basically it's that same kind of split between Plato and Aristotle. So this essay kind of goes through and walks through his kind of his major works and outlines his his metaphysics, his epistemology. So he was a systematic philosopher, which is why I think he had such a powerful influence, and he probably still does to this day. Now, when we were on campus, step back a little bit. So at the time that all this is being written, this is the height of kind of the violence, the left violence on the campuses, which he had published One-Dimensional Man, and then they started protesting the Vietnam War. then he actually jumps in and he starts organizing some of these like these anti-war protests, and he gets really active in organizing, and he's not really, he's kind of criticized for the violence that's happening. There's a lot of violence that's going on at this time.
Right.
Like I think I wrote, just there's a quote from, like I got this from Hardcore History, a podcast by Dan Carlin, and he was quoting from Nixon's memoirs just to kind of set the stage. From 1969 to 1970, at the time that this essay was written, there were 40,000 bombings or bomb threats in the US, averaging about 80 a day, and there were 43 people killed. So just to kind of set the stage there of what was happening, the left was rising up, and there were these protests everywhere, the anti-war protests, there were bombings happening. So it was just like this kind of eruption of violence, and he was right there, kind of at the stage, being the guru of the left, as you will. So that's
like
kind of a
summer
long
of 2020.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely parallels. This is sort of if you kind of look at it like certain philosophers influencing history, like he's kind of experiencing a resurgence. I don't remember being taught him specifically, like, or reading One Dimensional Man in college, but I remember that at the time, and I was like in the 90s, like his critical theory was already pretty entrenched in the humanities.
Yeah, I mean, probably, the inventor of critical theory, I'd have to look it up, but I mean, I think some people attribute that to Marx, or maybe even Kant, but I think it's a process, but certainly by him, it was blossoming into, explicitly needing to be critical of existing systems. I find, so much of what goes on in the essay, it's like he is almost literally the polar opposite of Rand in terms of what he's suggesting. He's saying that, we need an effortless existence. And so, I just think that, he's considered the father of the new left. I mean, I don't know if woke is the new left. This was 52 years ago, but it from the opening, it could have been like today. I mean, people were bewildered that this terrorization was happening from those claiming to be about tolerance. And I know at least one of the quotes from the piece was of this student rebel saying, "We won because we were intolerant, because this person had a right to be on campus from Dow, and we stopped them from being on campus." And, he's bragging about that, and he's saying explicitly that it was Marcuse that inspired him.
Well, the left comes from a position that everything's about power. Everything's a power struggle in nature. So they have what I think an advantage in that regard is that they're willing to use, violence and intolerance and sheer power to get what they want. And when a culture starts breaking down, the side that's willing to use power, brute strength, is going to win. The other side, that side doesn't care what you have to say. They're not going to get in a debate with you. So if you're unwilling to fight back and retaliate and use your own power to, save your culture, then you're going to lose, because they are basically animals. They have not risen to a peaceful, civilized, state. They still believe. Go ahead.
Well, I know later in the essay that one of the things that he says is that liberating tolerance then would mean an intolerance against the movements from the right and toleration of movements from the left. So, I think that animal thing exists that you're talking about, but in this case, they're really, explicitly employing a double standard, kind of the double standard we see all around us today, where they're just, if they see them as agents of the right, they're going to be intolerant, yet they're going to treat people from their own camp differently.
Right. Well, that's what you do in war. You have to get along with somebody. And I think that that comes from their hypocrisy or their contradictions, that basically just comes from, their desire to continue the struggle and to continue living. If they didn't want to live, if they actually were operating on, a death premise, then they would just commit suicide or they'd give up. But really, a lot of their rhetoric is just rhetoric. It's not meant to be put into practice. What they put into practice is the power struggle to gain power.
Right. And the contradictions are just a means to that end. They don't have to be consistent if they're just looking for power. They may say things to confuse people, but yeah, that's they don't have to be consistent, or that's why consistency is considered a manifestation of white privilege in some cases. That's what they'll say to kind of quiet us for wanting to be held to a single standard for everyone.
And another aspect of this hypocrisy, I think, relates to camouflage. There's a reason why soldiers wear camouflage. It's to blend in with your environment, or they might wear the enemy's uniform to invade their ranks. And this is something that the left employs, I believe. I believe they act like civilized people in some regards, like they talk about civil rights and that sort of thing. But it's really just a way to blend in with civilized people to make them think that they're one of them.
Well, but according to Marcuse's view, he seems to think that if you're one of these, forces for change or radicals, that, you shouldn't even be held to the same standard, and you should be able to do what you want. And it's only if you're an agent of capitalism that you should experience intolerance.
Right, because he's setting it up. It's like it's the oppressor kind of mindset, that victim oppressor. Although I think they say it's kind of oppressor versus the oppressed. But yeah, he kind of outlines that and he has another essay, repressive tolerance, and it basically is, it's the argument for the double standard, like anything that the right does, which he's definitely defining the right as capitalism. He is attacking capitalism out of the gate. He's saying that capitalism is slavery, which we know it's the exact antithesis. He's anti-Rand, basically. And he has this belief that I think all the people in the New Left kind of believe that you can organize society. And this is from the essay. They have this belief that society somehow has the power to alter reality and nature. So they're taking away like logic and reason. They're critiquing out of the gate, Aristotle, and they're saying that is just repressive. So when you see things like 2 + 2 = 5, that's that logic is oppressive kind of part of the left. That's straight out of Marcuse.
Well, that comes from his principle of attacking the majority, right? He's anti-majority. So if you're a revolutionary and you're trying to take over power, you need to attack what's established, traditions, something that's the norm. So if 2 + 2 = 4 is the norm, then you have to argue for 2 + 2 = 5, because you have to be an antagonist. You have to upset the balance. You're the enemy, you're their enemy. You need to attack them and get them on their heels.
It's also this view that tradition is inherently bad, and that, if it's a truth that someone who was one of these capitalist oppressors also said, then it must be rejected to create this new utopia, including the scientific method.
Yeah, whatever the capitalists, if the capitalist argument contradicts their will or their wish for power, then the capitalist is wrong and has to be attacked.
Yeah, 2 + 2 = 4 is too restricting for their social agenda.
One thing on attacking capitalists and subverting the establishment is that, to some degree, I believe they use alleged injustices simply as an excuse to inject violence into the culture or into society. it doesn't even have to be an actual injustice. It could just be some perceived slight against them, or some perceived, attack by the police on some poor Black person or something like that. And they don't even wait for a trial to determine the truth. They just, it's their perception, it's their wish, whatever they wish happened for them. And then they project that interpretation onto reality, and then use it as just a justification for violence and rioting.
They're recruiting anyone who has the anger of injustice, and they don't care whether it's a real injustice or perceived injustice. They're going to blame it all on the evil capitalist system as why they're in their predicament, and only joining the revolution is their solution to whatever it is.
But don't you think even the blaming of capitalism is a misdirection, is just BS, and it's an excuse to be violent and try to overthrow the government? I think if they lived in a non-capitalist, we're not even capitalist, right? We're a mixed society. But if they were in like a fascist society, pure fascism, then they would use the same excuse to cause violence. It's not just capitalism.
Well, I think they have to destroy capitalism because they want basically a slave-based system. They want the government, the state, ultimately to control all means of production. That's what they're trying to get to. So they can't have they can't have these free people running around having prosperity and buying TVs and iPhones and having a good time. I mean, he talks about how in this essay, like how Marcuse he resents that, and he criticizes the communists for that. He says, the communists failed not only to implement it properly, because, all the millions of people that died, but then they also didn't predict the success of capitalism. They didn't understand like how it would continue on, and people wouldn't have the will to do to go to the revolution that they're always calling for. So they want this chaos. I think it's what, it's like when Marx was, it's like everything that exists must perish. Isn't that the kind of the
right?
Mm-hmm.
I don't think many people in Marcuse's camp would even see a difference between capitalism and fascism. At least they would say that. I just think, one of Marcuse's claims is that we don't need capitalism anymore, but now we're addicted to it because of things like advertising, which is another trope I hear from the left. I mean, he sees productive work as part of the Freudian death instinct, being addicted to death.
Yeah, the performance principle. Anything that's achievement or work, like you're basically the slave. So he calls anybody that's out there earning a living, that's the worst thing. So then you're just sort of, you're a kind of, a victim of this establishment, and you're just like working for the man, and he criticizes that. So basically he's trying to get you to rebel and he thinks that the ideal state is just like this passive, everybody's needs are met. There's enough wealth that capitalism created, is kind of what he talks about. And so now we have enough money that everybody's basic needs can be taken care of, as long as we live at a lower standard of living. Because he does realize you can't, like, you have to kind of end it at some point and lower people's expectations for supply shortages and lines and stuff that are coming, but yeah, I mean, okay.
He's kind of operating on the concrete bound mentality, where he looks out in society and he sees this semi-capitalism creating all this wealth and productivity, and he thinks that's just nature. That's the way things are, right? He doesn't grasp the abstract principles which led us to this point, and which must be maintained in order to keep the situation going. So he on some level, he's ignoring what the causes of the productivity of the wealth. But on another point, I wanted to say that at some level, he's not really all against work. Like he's not anti-work. He's anti the employer-employee system where you have to work for somebody else. So I think even under communism, he recognizes people will have to work. But the difference is that they get paid they get money according to their need, and they work according to their ability. So there's no like trade. It's just the state imposing its ideas of what you need and what your abilities are on you.
Yeah, it's communal labor, I think he calls it.
I mean, I think his ideas are really a big driving part of UBI, Universal Basic Income, as part of this kind of effortless existence that he seemed to be advocating.
Yeah, and interestingly, one of his doctoral students, I think his name is Paul Gottfried. I think yeah, if you kind of go back and look, there are definitely some lines of thinking in the Silicon Valley kind of movements that are going on, where you can see that kind of evolving, like, oh, look, we have all this technology now, we have enough technology, we have enough wealth, and now people don't have to work. You know, it's kind of, there's still this like utopian idea that people are going to get away from work.
Well, he saw free trade as akin to slavery if someone didn't want to pay you what you're selling your product for. So,
right.
You know, by that standard, I mean, everyone's going to consider themselves a slave.
Right, because anything that basically your whole life is just instant gratification. So whatever you want is what you get. And then if somebody says, no, you can't have that, oh, you have to come into the office, or, oh, I'm only going to pay you X, then they're basically being an oppressor.
Right.
He's kind of conflating two business terms. In my view, he's conflating ownership with renting. So you own a slave, but you rent someone's labor. Like you pay them for their time and their work. You don't have a title to their life.
Yeah.
So there's this conflation going on, and it might be related to what I think is his inability to connect the employer-employee relationship to just a simple leader-follower relationship, which we've had throughout time. You know, some people need leadership, they don't know what to do, and some people are leaders and they can't really do a lot of labor. They have to be leading. So you get that relationship just in nature. And then capitalism, I think, turns that into a non-violent relationship.
I agree with that, but he started off as a communist. I mean, he's one of the, originators of the Frankfurt School.
He believes in violence.
What's that?
He believes in violence. Violence is part of nature. It's part of his core metaphysics. He says that nature is attacking man, or nature, what's the word he used? Nature irritates man or disturbs man with stimuli.
Oh, with needs.
So,
yeah.
Yeah, with needs. And so he's essentially at the metaphysical level, he's presenting man at war with nature. And so that's a very malevolent universe premise, as objectivists would call it. Whereas Ayn Rand is the direct opposite. She believes that nature's, indifferent to you, and therefore it's a benevolent universe where you can pursue values. And she doesn't see the stimuli nature provides you as antagonistic or a problem. She sees it as something you should seek out to survive.
Absolutely. One of the things that I found was where he almost inadvertently self-parodies George Orwell. George Walsh quotes Marcuse, "The logic of thought is slavery." And then he goes on to say, "Capitalism is freedom, which is slavery plus technology. Freedom is a concentration camp. Freedom is slavery." So again, he's taking these kind of views that if it existed in the past as something that capitalists benefited from, then it really is the opposite of what it is. You know, that freedom is slavery. You think you're free, but you're not. You'd really be free if you became a communist revolutionary.
Yeah, I mean, it's completely anti-reality. I mean, it's basically, he took everything, it's like a redux of everything bad about Western philosophy in one, in like his works. You know, he basically took it and made it easier to read for people. So he's like putting the, I don't know, like making like Kant and Hegel and Marx, and then he adds Freud into it, which, wow.
Yeah.
That's where the Eros and civilization comes from. And like, and he's, so basically like, I think, and this is in the essay too, where we're talking about like, if, you know, Ayn Rand says, you know, the age of reason, you know, if that was like, you know, where you had Aristotle was the greatest influence, then he's the age of Eros or age of love, where it's just like complete emotionalism and whim worship.
You know, if you're, and this goes to the epistemology of Marcuse, if you're oriented towards introspection of your own mind and imagination, and you're not oriented outward as objectivists would like to be, then you're not going to have a grasp on objective reality. And you're going to have a very disjointed or rationalistic grasp on your own mind. So what ends up happening is their philosophy can't be applied in reality because it doesn't work. And so they have to attack reality and try to turn it into something that isn't real, so that they can then project their own thoughts and mind onto something else, like a second, they call it a higher reality or a second reality, and say,
Right.
that's the real reality that we should be adopting. But really it's just a projection of their crazy ideas.
Yeah, I was amazed how much was explicitly Platonic with the kind of two worlds, and it just, he talks about, you know, this world being the kind of capitalist real world where logic and thought come into play. And then there's this higher realm of essence and, you know, just basically the world of forms and everything being perfect. And, you know, in this other reality, communism actually works and makes him a hero.
Yeah, well, he's taking the mysticism out of Plato, but actually kind of twisting it into like a secular mysticism, where the paradise is this effortless life,
Yes.
which doesn't exist. So he's got this heaven of his own, but it's dressed up to look like reality, like a secular life. But there's no such thing as an effortless life. So it's just crazy talk.
And even, I mean, this does go back to a little bit of a debate about how, you know, we're moving towards technology and replicators, and is that actually going to solve the problem for everyone? And it's interesting. I've heard some objectivists say that no, that can't be, and that is there's still going to be something you need to feed the machines, or that's just an attempted, you know, socialist attempt to say that this effortless existence is actually right around the corner. We just need to accelerate the communist revolution to get there.
But I think that's a mistake they made because they think that advancing technology is going to lead to people not having jobs and not working. But every time we have this technological revolution, it's like it leads to more people working and more jobs and more prosperity. I mean, if you look at computers, like how many people have jobs now because we have computers and the internet, and it just keeps going. But they think like, oh, if we have more technology, then like, I don't know how they can see in the future, first of all, but like if we have these technologies that they see coming, that it's going to somehow eliminate the need for work. And I totally disagree. Like you can never get away from the basic, you know, you have to, you have to make a living, you have to have sustenance for yourself, you're always going to have these needs, you're always going to have to conquer nature and figure out nature, and you can never stop doing that. That's like the nature of, that's how we survive.
So this goes to the actual definition of what you mean by life. So one other thing the leftists do, I think, is actually try to redefine life. Like they think that life is this abstract thing that they can just, make up, and it can be whatever their construct of life is. But life is something real in the objective world. And, Ayn Rand defined it, and we can go over her definition, but I think that you need to look at actual lives and people living their lives, and what happens when someone is born and grows up and becomes a mature adult, and then enters old age, and that's a life. And if you're just hooked up to a machine, with some machines feeding you and cleaning your butt and doing all these things that need to be done for you to survive, is that life? I don't think that's life. I think that's just mere existence.
No, and depending on who's controlling the input, the sensory input, I mean, it could be total just domination and slavery. It's like the exact antithesis of what he's trying to say, he's trying to get to, but it's like, you can't, yeah, I mean, if you just retreated into the world of imagination and you lived in your mind all the time and you separated yourself from the real world, I mean, you wouldn't be a lot. I mean, you wouldn't be living,
Yeah, I mean, Marcuse claims we don't need capitalism anymore, but we're addicted to it. That same type of mentality is going to come out and say, oh, you don't need your favorite food. You're addicted to it. You can have beans and rice like the rest of us.
Yeah, he does really want to reduce society to a lower standard of living. And I think that's on purpose. I mean, you can't support, he knows that you wouldn't be able to support a large flourishing population under communism.
Mhm.
He knows the historical examples, and he knows, exactly what his ideas would lead to. So he knows that you need to lower the standard of living and then come up with an excuse for why that's good.
Exactly. I think he does. I think that the intellectuals are aware. They know what they're doing. It's managed decline, and they know it. And I think that I mean, that's why when he was criticized for the violence by some of the other critical theorists from the Frankfurt School, like then he ended up kind of, trying to go off into the periphery, and kind of he got involved with like the environmentalist and feminist movements. So like he even like, I mean, they saw it. It's basically, he's calling for revolution. He's trying to overturn. It's the same thing. It's basically neo-Marxism.
Exactly.
When I heard that he eventually went into environmentalism, I wasn't surprised, because I reading this article, I got the impression that he was actually anti-human, anti-man. He wasn't anti-capitalist. I think the leftists, being anti-capitalist is just a manifestation of being anti-man, because man produces, and capitalism is like the logical, rational social system. And so it's for man. So if you're anti-man at the root, you're going to be anti-capitalist. And so politically, that'll be the manifestation of being anti-man. But really, he just hates life. He's a malevolent universer. He hates his life, and his philosophy is intended to systematize that hate.
Yeah, I think, definitely as countries become capitalist, they tend to have a population boom, even if we're not going in that direction right now. But that's part of what they've hated, as they've hated humanity, seeing us as inherently greedy or, oppressive, that the more of us there are, the worse it is. So, and especially when you consider things like our carbon footprint, as you're, dealing with the environmentalists, or the, raping nature of man. If you're appealing to the feminists, you can, easily find someone to vilify and turn them into, anti people as well.
Yeah, and it's easily to just say anybody that's opposed to what you're talking about, they're not in the know, and they're just on the oppressive side. So you don't have to listen to them, and you can use violence against them, basically. Silence them, censor them.
And it doesn't have to go that far. There can be just a kind of shunning of society, and that doesn't mean that they don't have violence on their minds, but just that you can just say, don't listen to them, don't pay attention to them, don't cover them objectively, because that counts as tolerance on the right. We can't have tolerance on the right. Tolerance is only for the left.
I think that strategy works with low IQ people who don't have a will or desire of their own to be independent. So what the left does a lot these days is recruit from the dependent classes. And this is probably just like a natural result of their philosophy. But as a tactic or strategy, I think it works to build up this submissive army where they just follow the leader, blindly. They don't really have motivations of their own. Their motivation is like just animalistic, basically. It's raw. It's just, let's do what the leader says. Let's do what the authority says, because that's, how we're going to get our paycheck. You have people like George Soros paying people to just go out and protest. They don't know what they're protesting. They can't argue or debate. They're just out there smashing windows and holding signs, and they're basically brain dead.
Well, I kind of disagree a little bit there, just because I think, and he talks about it, I think it's the people that are it's the intelligent people in college he's going after. He's going after the affluent students, and it's basically indoctrination. And it is kind of done in a way of like, if you don't, like, I remember being in college and they would be talking critical theory, like analyzing some work of literature, and you would disagree, and you would bring up another point, and they would just say, well, you can't possibly know because you're not this person's ethnicity, or you can't. It's like they take away your ability to kind of reason and use logic. They're trying to make people brain dead, but I think the people that they're trying to indoctrinate are quite intelligent. And it's almost like it's like an elite vanguard of this. Like he talks about, making people like have a weighted vote later on in the essay. He talks about, well, if we had this democratic, what is it? The democratic educational technocracy or something. It's like a totalitarian based on educational, like the higher educational level you reach, you get a higher vote in the society.
I just think you both are probably right on a certain level that, yes, Marcuse and many others are appealing to low intelligence people on a certain level to just become their cannon fodder and revolutionaries. But on another level, yes, it absolutely is. They're going after these college educated people. And that's what we see today. I mean, whether it's Karens or what have you, it's these shrill people that seem like they're somewhat educated.
Well, there might be a historical context issue here. I think in 1970, when Walsh wrote this article, they may have been going after the more intelligent university students. But these days, I think that the universities are where you find most of the dumbasses. And
well, they've lowered the standards for sure. Like,
yeah, and
depending on how you measure intelligence, that could apply to the professors.
Well, they've had decades to lower the standards of education. And so you have, of course, there's intelligent people in college, but I think those people see right through the woke left. They're the ones who are going to the right. And so the ones that are staying on the left are just dumb. and they are the foot soldiers now who are going out and can't debate. They can't argue. So there's going to be some professor level people on the left, but they're out of ideas. I think they're out of ideas, and I think to some extent the right is turning a corner here and getting the upper hand. But the problem is the left has taken over a lot of institutional power, and so the left is going to float on their power for a long time.
Yeah, and you're right. I mean, it's both. I mean, I think they're appealing to the people that don't have anything to lose, kind of, and they can go out and cause destruction, which we saw in the riots of 2020. But then there's mixed in with that is the kind of these revolutionary these leaders that are the true believers. They're kind of the brainwashed, woke army. And then the people in the colleges are, kind of in that kind of, I mean, it's a religion. To your point, I mean, he basically spells it out as religion and saying that it's this, it's this world of ideas and essences. It's basically Platonism. So it is religion. And so if you buy into the religion, you absolutely think that you're right, and nobody else can possibly be right because you're so right. And therefore the ends justifies the means, and you're going to get your way at all costs. Is basically what they're setting up.
Yeah. When we say the new left is a religion, it's not just hyperbole. We're referring to something and how they've adopted mysticism and
no, and I think it's a new type of religion, actually. I mean, new in the sense that it's relatively new. It's not historical. But historically, you had Christianity, which I think was a blending of Judaism and Roman paganism. And today, I think what we're seeing the left do is they're trying to blend a sort of mysticism with secularism. And so that's why you get these vestiges of religion in the woke left. And as they decide what their principled stand is going to be, I think they're just going to revert back to mysticism, and it's going to become a full-blown religion.
Yeah, I don't doubt that. I think you can compare it to kind of the early days of Christianity, and we're in that phase where, they're still not, even before Augustine came around, they're still trying to figure out exactly what it is they believe. And that's part of what it can make a newer religion more dangerous than an older religion, because it's that not feeling like, you haven't been crushed by reality for 1,000 years, that you have to start making compromises with it. And so they can come out and just say, oh, we can just, feed everyone and kill all the business owners and everything will be fine.
Right. Yeah. I mean, and that's what they need to do in order to have the collective ownership that they want, where you have collective, the government has collective control, and they have all, central planning, and all the means of production are controlled. I mean, it's basically fascism. I mean, fascism, communism. I mean, you can argue the differences, but they're slight,
Yeah. And, I heard a Leonard Peikoff quote where he was saying that he believes that the danger is, basically National Socialism from the left. So the idea that there can be a fascist left is not inherently contradictory.
Yeah, I mean, I think ultimately it's basically freedom versus slavery, and they flip it and say capitalism is slavery, which it's not. And then but they have to destroy that because they don't want any freedom, because they want to have this situation where they think society can somehow just organize itself and provide print money unlimited, and everybody can just have all their needs met, and it can be this life of passive imagination. I don't know, it's basically nuts. I mean, it's like James Lindsay calls it like the clown world, which I think actually Marx admits that too, or he writes about that. It's like, it's just, you have to, when you take away reason, I mean, you're opening up everybody to kind of just like mob rule.
Yeah. And along those lines, once you dispense with reason and things like consistency and definitions, I mean, one of the points that Walsh makes is that free society to Marcuse actually means societies that are using force for redistribution. So you can say to someone, hey, I'm for a free society. And they're like, I am too.
Of course, that's because at a fundamental level, Marcuse means something different by freedom than we do. So his freedom is freedom from tension. He calls it tension, I guess. And he thinks tension is bad. So nature causes these stimuli to hit you, and then you have to do something about it, right? So that's how nature disturbs you. So like ideally, he wants to just, live peace in a peaceful, comfortable state, I guess. It's kind of like his version of heaven. But then nature gets involved, this pesky thing.
Right.
And it causes tension. So on some level, he's offering this general conclusion about nature, right? So you on one level, you got to ask, how did he come to this conclusion? What evidence does he have for this freedom from tension argument? But on the other hand, you just have to recognize that he has this fundamental, what he calls a fundamental urge, which is driving mankind, which drives our nature. And like, why does he use this as the fundamental urge?
Yeah.
Tension to him is, I think, choice. So it's like the exact opposite of what it really, it's if you don't have, so if you're ruled by brute force and you don't have any choices at all, then paradoxically you're free.
It's so like Ayn Rand's relative that came here and couldn't decide among the different choices of mouthwash.
So why do you think that he believes a tension-free life is the ideal?
I think I think that's the big lie that the communists have, it's like their utopia, right? It's this, they have to have some promise of, oh, look, I'm going to alleviate your suffering. I'm going to take you away. You're not going to have anything to worry about. It's like this promise of everything's going to be okay. And it's all going to be taken care of if we can just get here.
And also these kind of Marxist or socialist, anti-property views that came out were at a time where, there was just terrible toil. And, by today's standards, I mean, people were working these, 16-hour days, 6 or 7 days a week, and, in dangerous conditions. And so they were saying, this is what we're offering as the alternative. You'll never have to deal with that. You won't have some greedy capitalist making you do that. We're going to make you free from all of that effort. And it probably sounded a little bit like a heaven at the time.
Do you think it was some sort of response to wars? You always hear about the peace movement and, don't make war, make love and all this stuff. But at some level, when you are being attacked or encounter an evil nation, that's trying to destroy you, you have to make war. Or even when you're dealing with a segment of society that is hostile to natural rights or individual rights or your freedom, you got to go to war to defend yourself. And so if war is like the enemy of the socialist, then they've got to undermine it and say that war isn't good, and so they start picking it apart and come up with tension, like tensions cause war and that sort of thing.
I think there's two different reasons. There's legitimate reasons for war and there's illegitimate ones. Like, I think sometimes you have to go to war to defend yourself if you're attacked. But I think it's between, war would be between sovereign states. Like, you can't, if we devolve into, food shortages and mass chaos in the streets and we fight each other, that's not really war in a sense. That's just sort of destruction of our society. I mean, it's not, I don't, we're not, like,
But
who would you go to war with? I mean, you wouldn't, there's no,
well, you go to war with, militant groups that are within your society, like
but they had that
revolutionary.
during, like, they had all those militant groups in the 60s and 70s. They had, hundreds of them. And that, I mean, they didn't declare war on them.
I think William's circling back to his war on socialism.
Oh,
Well, let's take a broader view of it and just talk about war between nations. I'm thinking of communist countries and semi-capitalist countries like America. They were in a Cold War and a hot war in Vietnam. And I'm thinking that some of this new socialism may be related to, especially the Marcusian brand, may be related to that thing that's going on in reality. They're trying to make an argument for not going to war with communists.
Yeah, that definitely plays a role in what their attitude towards war is. There was a, kind of red left-leaning groups in this country were very supportive of neutrality for the US, while Hitler and Stalin had a pact. But it was after Hitler attacked Stalin in June of 1941 that they started becoming, hardcore war hawks and wanting us to get in the war and get more involved however we could. So yes, it does matter who the opponents are to their comrades.
well, I think war in that sense, I mean, from the socialist viewpoint, I mean, they're looking at it like they need to go and acquire more wealth, because once you you get rid of the engine of wealth, capitalism, and you run out of other people's money, you have to go and create wars. You have to have a blank check on the taxpayer. And, if you're in a mixed economy, you have to kind of create this, oh, look, we need billions of more dollars, it's like this, it becomes like this money machine, what is it, the military industrial complex, So I think it can be corrupted, and then it becomes, what is it in George Orwell? We're at war with Eurasia. We've always been at war with Eurasia, right?
Yeah, perpetual war.
I think that goes on, but I also think that that's been a charge of the left, that capitalism is inherently warlike, and they were seeing the the fight between Germany and England as just these two capitalist forces going at it.
Yeah, well, Marcuse makes that argument in the paper, or Walsh describes his argument. He says that capitalists will make war, make up enemies to distract you from the brainwashing that they're doing on the population. So for him, war is kind of like a way to find something that will cause you to evade what is going on in your own society.
Yeah, well, he's very single-minded. He even, as much as he embraced the pleasure principle, he didn't want people doing drugs because he didn't want to take their focus off of the revolution. So, I think he may be against war, but he's for his kind of war, which is revolution.
Well, and interestingly, in that, he talks, one of the strategies he talks about is that propaganda is okay. Like, I think he talks about when you're trying to have this revolution and you're trying to get to this utopia, it's okay. The media should be lying to you, that's okay, it's weird because I mean, it's exactly what we're seeing. I'm trying to find the quote.
Yeah, he was saying there shouldn't be an objective media.
Right.
He got his wish.
I forget his reason for that was, did he straight out say you shouldn't be allowed to have an objective media, or was it twisted in some way? Like there was a reason for it.
I'm sure it's to serve the revolution.
Yeah.
Maybe they don't have the right, if you're trying to destroy the establishment, then you have to undermine it in some way. And so, they don't have any right to be the establishment because they're brainwashing the people. And so they don't have a right to even tell the truth or something like that.
Yeah, this is the quote. It says, the re-education of the majority may require apparently undemocratic means. This would include the withdrawal of toleration of speech and assembly from groups and movements which promote aggressive policies, armament, chauvinism, discrimination on the grounds of race and religion, or which oppose the extension of public services, social security, medical care, etc. Since Marcuse does not qualify the term extension, this would leave only socialists with the rights of free speech and assembly. That's from Repressive Tolerance, his essay.
You might say, that's crazy. Can you imagine them only wanting freedom of speech and assembly for their side?
So I want to note that his reason for withdrawal of toleration of speech and assembly is because these people might promote aggressive policies or armament, chauvinism, things like that, or they might oppose public services, which socialists, of course, triumph.
Right. They don't even want you questioning the welfare state.
Yeah. So I would say that this is an invalid reason for promoting the withdrawal of toleration of speech. But my view
against
is that
it before.
my view is that there is a valid reason for intolerance of certain speech and certain assembly, but that requires going into the nature of rights and individual rights and the initiation of force and what constitutes an initiation of force. But just in general, I think the left has an advantage over the right in this particular regard because they are willing to censor their enemies and prevent them from gathering, but they mostly do it at a non-governmental level, but they are starting to do it at the governmental level as well. But this, I think, is an advantage, and I think it's part of their willingness to just use sheer power. They will try to use whatever power they have to gain government, gain power over the government.
Yeah, and I think it goes back to why they have the war on words, because they think that words are reality in a way. They like, because they're German idealists at the root, so their reality is in the mind. So they think they can alter reality just by, let's take away words, let's not say this, let's not say that. But in a free society, common sense person would realize, words don't hurt you. You need free debate. You're not going to like what everybody says all the time, and you're going to be offended. But in their mind, they want freedom from any sort of, feeling bad at all. They just want freedom from this this state of fear and dread, or this, the angst. It's they think that that other people are causing that. So they want
freedom from you or reality questioning them.
Yeah. So at a very fundamental level, as we've learned from reading this article, the left considers nature to be at war with them. Nature is a bother. It irritates them. And so your words, you speaking, that's part of nature. You're sending your words into their mind, and they've been brainwashed by their side. So they don't want to be brainwashed by you, right? So they want to maintain their ideas. They don't want to be influenced by you. They don't want to be bothered by you. They want to have an effortless sycophancy to their leader.
Yeah, they say words are violence. To me, I used to say that there are three main motives for people getting into socialism: either guilt or fear, or hatred of the nature of reality. And I think that Marcuse, while he implores all of it, he's mainly focusing on hatred of the nature of reality, and that it starts with his Platonic two worlds, and he just goes from there to just say that, everything you think you like about reality is really just you being the victim of advertising and being addicted to what you see as your happiness. And we need to take it away from you to show that that's not really what matters.
Yeah, I think at the core of it all is a hatred or an envy. Ayn Rand wrote an article, The Age of Envy.
Envy is what I meant instead of hatred, instead of fear.
Yeah, they envy, those with power, those with money. That's why they go after the rich and politicians, and even their own side. Like they'll go up to their own people in power, or who some consider their own people in power, the leftists or the Democrats or the liberals, and they'll irritate them. They'll pester them to death to get them to do what they want, right? This is like, we're going to go to your house. We're going to go where you are eating dinner and pester you until you do what we want. They're all about hating someone else's life, enjoying their life. Like if Nancy Pelosi is going off enjoying her life, it's probably not a good example to use Pelosi, but let's say she's enjoying her life and doing something. They think she should be doing something else. And so they're going to pester her to do what they want her to do.
Well, because if they see someone else's achievement, it reminds them that they've failed in some way, or that instead of taking it upon themselves to switch their mindset to a growth mindset and actually go do something and have a purpose, they want to just tear down, the people of achievement, because they want everybody to be, down on the lower level altogether, and we can all wallow in the mud and then we'll all be happy.
Yeah.
And
Right.
So they have to go after it. I think that's why they go after the educational systems. I mean, you have to get rid of people's the use of reason, the use of logic, and then you have to. He says you're going to have this freedom from guilt and fear. You're not going to have to feel guilty for not being as successful as someone else, and you're not going to have to fear, the dangers of the natural world.
It's very emotion based, subjective. It's all the bad things that objectivists are against.
As an aside, the danger of Marcuse was evident 50 years ago. All this going on the campus was happening in the 60s. This to me makes me rethink a little bit of this strategy of going in and trying to reform academia that objectivism had. And I guess, it seems a little idealistic. Now, maybe you could argue that, they thought they could turn things around and it hadn't, it wasn't as bad as it is today, but it just, it seems like there should have been more, to the extent we're supposed to be radicals for capitalism, we should have been doing a little more of our thumbing the nose at the existing establishment instead of trying to gain their acceptance.
Well, I think you see that with some people kind of calling for a parallel society in a way. Like you almost have I think the university systems and educational systems have become so corrupt. He talks about that, restructuring the universities. You have to repeal the performance principle within the ivory tower, and then taking down the walls of the university to spread the world of the restructured ivory tower outward over the whole society. So this destruction of all that's good, basically, you have to kind of say no, that they've reached the clown world level and there is no logic and reason to what they're doing. And you have to kind of, now we have to rebuild the institutions based on reason and logic and science. It's like you can't operate within their system anymore if they're going to corrupt science now. And they're going to apply 2 + 2 = 5, illogic to everything. You almost have to let them sort of self-destruct and their own, what is it, the babbling idiot in the corner? There's nothing to their intellectual ideas anymore. It's all based on political force. This false critical theory that puts oppressor versus, the victims. And it's like Redux Marx, it's Redux, Freud, it's the Hegelian logic. You just have to kind of say, no.
Well, per the theme of Atlas Shrugged, you could argue that Rand would say maybe we should help it fall apart faster.
Well, be careful what you wish for. I don't.
I know it's a double-edged sword, but as of right now, and us not wanting the system to fail can become, us being unwitting supporters of it.
But I think
the system failing is a broad abstraction, right? So
right.
What exactly? I assume you mean the system that's upheld by leftist power. That should fail, but we need a replacement. So I think what the right is working on is creating their own establishments, their own institutions of power, and our choice as like people in the middle have to decide: is it time to just full bore join the right's crusade against the left, or should we still bother trying to talk to the left? And in my view is that the left is gone. They're intellectually bankrupt. There's nothing there anymore. And we should focus on the right and having debates with them.
Now, I use terms like the right and left myself, but I mean, you talk about wide abstraction. That's a wide abstraction. I mean, there are some good people on the left. Some people on the left, I think, can still be turned, like the Barry Weisses or the Weinsteins.
Yeah, I definitely don't mean the so-called liberal left. I mean the socialist left. I think they're gone.
But let's just say, why can't we just say if you're an objectivist thinker or you're a Hegelian thinker, or like you're using Aristotelian logic or you're using Hegelian logic, and I want to be on the side of Aristotelian logic based in nature and reality, and this other system that's out there is a religious system, and we don't have time for that anymore.
Well, I do agree with calling them religious. I think, they pride themselves on claiming they're science-based and evidence-based, and calling them out on being religious or in a cult is something that can help make them think things through.
But religion is also a large abstraction. So we have to be careful to distinguish between what I would say are the inert religions, like Judaism and Christianity, which have been around for so long that they've adopted many scientific ideas and essentially don't have a base anymore in miracles. They just kind of give lip service to the miracles,
right?
Versus the secular religion of the left, which is newer in the historical context, and is building up those miraculous principles and ideas and foundation. They're creating the
religion. It'll work if we all just want it to work.
So we have to either focus on preventing the left from becoming a full-blown religion, a crazy religion, or just devote our energy to improving the right and feeding them scientific information and logic.
Well, I think a lot of rational people, the rational people are in the majority and the common sense people are in the majority. And I think that these woke leftists, the media kind of amplifies them, but I think they are in the minority. And I think most people will get along. And I think they realize that you need to reform the university system. You need to take the government control out of it. You need to take this ideology out of it and reform it. And I think you need to also, there's art too. You have to go back and embrace heroes and achievement. And I think that it can change like by the decades. Like we've seen that where it's like all this violence was happening in the 60s and 70s. And then you had kind of this, I don't know, maybe you would disagree, but like kind of this brief period in the 80s where it was kind of like moving in maybe a more free market direction.
Yeah, I think that's a fair read of history.
Yeah, and you had Alan Greenspan that came from her circle, and then it's kind of flipped back the other way, and it's like maybe this is the death throes of their kind of attempt, and maybe they'll just be thwarted if everybody just continues to get along and try to have debates and discuss rational ideas and use logic and reason and realize and expose the clown world.
Well, I think history has proven that it's hard to digest socialism. It's hard to actually make it part of your system. If you inject socialism into your way of life and your culture, you kill your culture. That's kind of been proven time and time again. And not only kill your culture, but kill millions of people. And so you have these reactions, like you talk about the 80s. I think it was just a reaction to the chaos and socialism of the 70s, 60s and 70s. And now we might see a rebound or reaction to what we experienced, with the George Floyd riots and all the protests in the universities and everything that's going on with the BLM and Antifa and all this. We might see a reaction, but maybe we won't. Maybe we don't have the will to react anymore. And so that's what I'm concerned with is helping to generate the will to destroy the left, to destroy the socialist left.
But I think you have to destroy them. I mean, you can expose what they're trying to do. And I think that people are doing that. And it's starting and I know we're being censored in some channels, but it's like, they're trying to reverse, they're trying to reverse the progress of mankind. They're trying to reverse technological progress. And they're trying to take us back to a more primitive time where we have less wealth, less, of everything. And I think most people don't want that. Even if you're just a person that doesn't ever think about philosophy and you're just living your life, you still want your iPhone, your TV, and your car. You don't want those things taken away from you. So I think you can appeal to people on that level too, of like, hey.
No one's explicitly talking about taking those things away from people, though.
Well, they are. I mean, didn't Newsom just ban gasoline engines by 2030 or something?
Well, that's true. That's true. I think the phone would be much more personal, but yeah, there is danger. But I think post-COVID, there's a lot of people that are working from home. Maybe they're not driving as much. They're content to rent, and yeah. But you're right. That is something that they think they can get away with, so they're trying to.
I think Allie's right on point, because not only are they taking gadgets and tools and things away that they consider harmful to environment or society, they are taking your movement away. We just experienced this whole lockdown BS, and they'll use any emergency or semi-emergency to control you, to inject totalitarian ideas into society, collectivist ideas. This is what they do. They're masters of it.
That was a recurring theme of Atlas Shrugged.
Yeah, they use manufactured emergencies to put in, draconian rules and regulations, and then basically they want to use democracy itself to bring about socialism.
Yeah, but it's not a true democracy the way if you read, like, it's weighted votes based on intellectual or educational level. That
was his idea. But what are we talking about today? We're talking about getting rid of the Electoral College and things like that, and stuffing the Supreme Court, things like that.
An unchecked mail-in system. Yeah. But well, this has been a really good conversation. Allie, any final other things you wanted to bring up about Marcuse?
No, this has been a great discussion. I would just encourage anyone listening to definitely research and read him directly. There's essays out there that you can just read. James Lindsay has great analysis on him, and I would say read Atlas Shrugged.
Good advice. William, final thoughts?
I'd like to thank Allie for bringing this article to my attention. Even though I owned that big mammoth volume of The Objectivist, I never read this article. So I'm glad I spent the time to read it. It's very enlightening. And let's crush the left.
There you go. Yes, it was good. It was about 30 pages, but I got a lot out of it. So, well, good discussion. Thank you both. For the Ayn Rand Fan Club, I'm Scott Schiff along with William Swig, and we will see you next time.